Grand Marshal Fodix's 6 tentacles twitched nervously as the intelligence report appeared on the massive holographic display dominating the War Council chamber. The architecture of the room itself was a testament to the diverse species that comprised the Galactic Alliance. Spiraling corridors designed for the serpentine Slithians, transparent crystal walls preferred by the photosynthetic Lamidians, and gravity-altering platforms for the low-gravity dwelling Floations. This intelligence cannot possibly be accurate, Admiral Vexilla said, her crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the light from the display in jagged patterns across the chamber walls. Humans are barely interstellar. They've only established colonies on 3 planets beyond their home system. The holographic display showed grainy footage of human soldiers running through what appeared to be a storm of acid rain. One soldier slipped, their protective suit dissolving on contact with the ground, exposing raw flesh that sizzled and bubbled. The soldier's comrades rushed to help, laughing and making what the translator identified as jokes about getting a tan. The footage is authentic, confirmed Intelligence Director Xic, a small avian creature whose feathers were constantly shifting colors with his mood, currently a distressed purple. We verified it through 7 independent sources. Authentication probability stands at 99.997%. Chancellor Yolen, a mammalian representative covered in thick blue fur, stood up abruptly. Impossible. No organic life form can survive training in such conditions. That planet's atmosphere is 62% sulfuric acid vapor. The average temperature is 347 degrees on your standard scale. The gravity is 2.3 times that of most habitable worlds. The humans call it Camp Hellfire, Xic continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. It's one of 6 such training facilities they've established on planets that our scientists classified as uninhabitable death traps. General Zilthrax, whose species communicated through pulsating tentacles and skin color changes, turned a pale green, the equivalent of human nausea. But why? What possible reason could they have? The gathered representatives erupted into chaotic debate. A small delegation of Neptoids fainted outright when the footage showed a human soldier whose arm had been completely stripped of skin laugh and continued to fire a weapon with their other hand. Grand Marshal Fodix slammed a tentacle against the council table, instantly silencing the room. We need verified information, not speculation and panic. We've monitored humanity's expansion into the galaxy with minimal concern until now. They seemed unthreatening, focused on trade, exploration, and their bizarre cultural exchanges. They visited my homeworld last solar cycle, piped up a small gelatinous representative. They wanted to swim in our oceans. For recreation. They wore protective suits, of course, since our waters would dissolve their cellular structure. And now we discover they're purposefully training in environments that would kill most of our species instantly, Fodix continued. We need to understand why. Admiral Vexilla's crystalline form shimmered with concern. Could this be preparation for an invasion of worlds we consider uninhabitable, or preparation for war against us? General Zilthrax's skin flashed red with alarm. The room fell silent as the footage continued to play. A human instructor stood before a line of soldiers, all of whom were bleeding from various wounds. Pain is just weakness leaving the body, the instructor shouted, her face contorted into what the Alliance's xenopsychologists had identified as an expression of enthusiasm rather than distress. We need direct observation, Fodix decided. Our remote surveillance clearly isn't giving us the full picture. I volunteer, came a voice from the back of the chamber. All eyes turned to Operatives Vex, the Alliance's most decorated intelligence agent. A shapeshifter from the fringe worlds, Zvex had infiltrated 17 different species governments over his career. His natural form was vaguely humanoid, but with reflective gray skin and no discernible facial features. Perfect for an operative who spent most of his life disguised as other beings. Impossible. Chancellor Yolen objected immediately. You'd die within minutes of setting foot on these training worlds. I've been modified, Zvex replied calmly. My cellular structure can withstand extreme conditions for limited periods with proper chemical suppressants. Not indefinitely, but long enough to gather direct intelligence. Grand Marshal Phoenix considered the proposal. This is dangerous, Zvex. If the humans discover you, they'll likely dissect me to study how our biology differs from theirs, Zvex finished. I'm aware of the risk, but we need to know what they're preparing for. After a moment of deliberation, Phoenix nodded. Very well. You'll depart. Immediately. The council will reconvene upon your return, or upon receipt of your transmitted intelligence if you don't make it back. As Zvex left the chamber with the assignment details, the remaining council members watched the final seconds of the footage in horrified silence. A human soldier jumped into what appeared to be a pool of bubbling acid, emerging moments later with severe chemical burns covering half their body. They were laughing. May the cosmic forces protect us all, Chancellor Yolen whispered, if they ever decide to turn those training methods toward warfare against the Alliance. The operative stealth ship slipped undetected through the human defense perimeter. Earth had established a modest but effective early warning system around their solar system and key colony worlds, but Zvex's vessel employed technology several generations more advanced than human sensors could detect. As the ship approached the hellish training world, Zvex felt his first twinge of genuine fear in decades. The planet glowed an angry red through the view screen, its atmosphere swirling with toxic storms that carried molten metal particles. Lightning strikes powerful enough to vaporize small spacecraft rippled continuously across the upper atmosphere. Beginning atmospheric entry, the ship's AI announced with irritating calm. Stealth systems at maximum capacity. Reminder, biological suppression protocol must be initiated before departure from the vessel. Zvex inserted the series of auto-injectors into the specialized ports in his modified body. Each one delivered compounds that would temporarily alter his cellular structure, allowing him to withstand the extreme conditions outside, at least for a few hours. The pain was immediate and intense. His body felt like it was being crushed from the inside out as the chemicals went to work, hardening cell membranes, restructuring proteins, and temporarily shutting down non-essential biological processes. Pain is a messenger. Zvex recited the old operative's mantra. Acknowledge it, then send it away. But as the ship broke through the cloud cover and the full horror of the landscape came into view, Zvex wondered if any amount of training could prepare anyone, even humans, for this environment. The ground below was a patchwork of blackened rock and flowing rivers of molten material. Acid rain fell in sheets, dissolving anything not specifically designed to resist it. The ship's external sensors reported temperatures that fluctuated wildly between scorching heat and brief pockets of extreme cold, where atmospheric chemicals underwent endothermic reactions. Landing zone identified, the AI reported. Human training facility located 3.7 units northeast of planned touchdown point. Zvex carefully checked his environmental suit, a final layer of protection beyond his chemically modified biology, and engaged the personal stealth field that would render him virtually invisible to human detection systems. If they can train here, he muttered to himself, I can survive long enough to observe. The moment the ship's hatch opened, Zvex nearly collapsed. The crushing gravity and toxic atmosphere assaulted his senses despite all preparations. Each breath felt like inhaling shards of glass, and his muscles screamed in protest against the increased gravitational pull. He forced himself forward, each step an exercise in determination. According to the intelligence brief, he had landed near the perimeter of what humans called Extreme Environment Training Facility Alpha. The name lacked imagination, but perhaps creatures who regularly subjected themselves to these conditions didn't need to embellish with dramatic titles. The first group of humans came into view after Zvex crested a ridge of black, glass-like rock. Their environmental suits were far less sophisticated than his own, simple reinforced material with minimal protection compared to his technological marvel. Yet they moved with relative ease through the hellscape, conducting what appeared to be a standard military exercise. Zvex activated his recording equipment and zoomed in on the group. Listen up, maggots! a human instructor bellowed through an external speaker on their suit. This acid storm is nothing compared to what you'll face on the course tomorrow. I want you to run 3 laps around the perimeter. Anyone who falls behind gets volunteered for night sentry duty in the methane geysers. The soldiers let out a collective groan that quickly transformed into determined shouts. They began running, actually running through the acid downpour. Zvex could hardly believe what he was seeing. Even with his biological modifications and advanced protective suit, he was struggling to remain standing. These humans were running, for training purposes, voluntarily. One soldier slipped on the treacherous terrain and fell. Their suit immediately began to smoke where the acid had compromised its integrity. 2 others doubled back, hauling the fallen soldier to their feet. "Walk it off, Martinez," one shouted. "Just a little acid burn," the injured soldier replied with a laugh that sounded partly delirious. "Maybe it'll burn away that ugly face of yours if you get some too, Jackson." Both soldiers laughed and continued their run, the injured one limping but keeping pace. Zvex adjusted his position, moving closer to observe another group. These soldiers were engaging in what appeared to be weapons training. They were firing at targets that moved erratically, made more challenging by the howling acid winds and fluctuating gravity caused by the planet's unstable core. "Remember," an instructor shouted, "on Hellfire, you're fighting the environment as much as any enemy. If you can hit a target in this shitstorm, you can hit anything, anywhere." A massive tremor suddenly shook the ground. Zvex barely maintained his footing as a fissure opened in the ground nearby, spewing superheated gas and molten rock into the air. The human reaction was not what he expected. Rather than panic, the soldiers quickly formed teams, established a perimeter, and began setting up equipment to monitor the geological activity. It was as if they had trained for this specific scenario. "Class 3 eruption," called out what appeared to be a scientific officer. "Perfect timing. Squad 2, deploy the sensors. This is exactly what we've been waiting for." "You heard the captain," barked an officer. "Environmental hazard assessment training is now live. Move your asses like they're on fire, because soon they might be." The soldiers cheered, actually cheered, and rushed toward the active geological disaster with monitoring equipment. Zvex continued his observations for hours, moving between different training zones across the facility. Each scenario he witnessed seemed more insane than the last. A group practicing underwater maneuvers in a lake of liquid that wasn't water at all, but some kind of caustic chemical soup. Soldiers in reinforced suits being deliberately exposed to controlled radiation bursts to build tolerance. A medical training exercise where participants treated gruesome injuries sustained from the environment with casual efficiency, joking about spicy air and gravity hugs, while their comrades suffered wounds that would traumatize most alliance species. Near what appeared to be a command center, Zvex finally spotted someone who seemed to be in charge. A tall human female with short dark hair and an air of absolute authority was observing the training exercises from an elevated platform. "Captain Jones," one of the subordinates called out, "the new recruits have completed the acid run. Only 3 casualties this time." The woman, Captain Sarah Jones, nodded with apparent approval. "Better than last month. Send them to medical for patch-ups and have them ready for the lava surfing exercise by 1600 hours. Lava surfing, Mong." The subordinate checked a data pad. "That wasn't on the schedule until tomorrow." "I'm moving it up," Jones replied. "Intelligence says we might have a major solar flare tomorrow that'll add electromagnetic interference to our training environment. Perfect conditions for the multi-hazard combat scenario instead." Zvex edged closer, fascinated and horrified in equal measure. These humans weren't just enduring this environment. They were enthusiastically using every horrific aspect of it as a training tool. "Oh, and Lieutenant," Jones added, "tell Dr. Prakash I want to review the latest tissue regeneration data. That soldier who lost most of his left side yesterday, I want to know if the new treatments are working." "Yes, ma'am. He's already regrown about 30% of the affected tissue. Dr. Prakash says he'll be back in training by next week." Zvex nearly gave himself away with an involuntary gasp. Tissue regeneration of that magnitude? Alliance medicine could accomplish similar feats, but it required specialized facilities and weeks of treatment. These humans were doing it in a field hospital on a planet that shouldn't support life. His observations continued as he followed Captain Jones to another training area. Here, soldiers were being subjected to what the humans called nuclear conditioning, controlled exposure to radiation levels that would kill most species outright. "All right, you beautiful disasters," Jones called out to the assembled troops. "Today's lesson is surviving the unsurvivable. When you leave this facility, you'll be deployable to environments no other fighting force in the galaxy would dare set foot in." A young soldier raised a hand. "Ma'am, permission to ask why we're training for environments worse than anywhere we might actually fight." Jones smiled. Expressions Vex had learned indicated either pleasure or predatory intent in humans. Because, Private Williams, if you can fight in hell, you can fight anywhere. And because there are things out there worse than this planet. Things we need to be ready for. The cryptic answer seemed to satisfy the soldiers, who nodded with grim determination. Vex was so absorbed in recording this exchange that he failed to notice the subtle change in the electronic field around him. His stealth technology, while advanced, was struggling against the extreme electromagnetic interference generated by the planet's unstable core. Also, Jones continued, turning to look directly at the spot where Zvex stood invisible, because you never know who might be watching. Before Zvex could react, something heavy struck him from behind. His stealth field flickered and failed as he crashed to the ground, the crushing gravity driving the breath from his lungs. A human security officer stood over him, holding some kind of specialized detection device. "Gotcha, little spy," the human said with what Zvex recognized as a smile. "Captain Jones, one alien infiltrator, as you predicted." Jones approached, looking remarkably unsurprised to find an Alliance operative on her training ground. "We detected your ship entering the atmosphere hours ago," she said conversationally. "Nice tech, by the way. Almost invisible to our standard scanners." "Almost," the security officer added with a grin. Jones crouched down, examining Zvex with undisguised curiosity. "You're holding up surprisingly well in this environment. Some kind of biological modification? Fascinating." Zvex remained silent, mentally activating his emergency beacon. The situation had gone catastrophically wrong, but he could still transmit his gathered intelligence back to the Alliance. "Oh, don't worry about your distress signal," Jones said, as if reading his thoughts. "We're not jamming it. In fact, I hope your leaders are watching this right now." She looked directly into Zvex's recording device. "Hello, Alliance War Council. Welcome to Camp Hellfire." Zvex felt his modified biology beginning to fail. The suppression chemicals could only hold back the effects of the environment for so long, and the stress of capture had accelerated their breakdown. Pain lanced through his body as his cellular structure began to succumb to the toxic atmosphere. "You're looking rough there, friend," Jones observed. "Would you like a lift back to your ship? We're not actually in the business of letting visitors die, even the uninvited ones." The unexpected offer of mercy confused Vex. "Why? Would you help me?" he managed to ask, his translator struggling to function. Jones shrugged. "Because we're not monsters. Just humans who prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." She gestured to her officers. "Get our guest some medical attention and escort him back to his vessel. Make sure he gets all the footage he came for on the way." As Zvex was helped to his feet, Jones added with a hint of amusement, "And tell your council, we're not training to fight you. We have much bigger concerns. If they're interested in discussing those concerns, our diplomatic corps is available anytime." The last thing Zvex managed to transmit before his systems began shutting down was Captain Jones standing calmly in the acid rain, looking directly into his recording device with an expression that conveyed both warning and invitation. The War Council chamber had never been so quiet. Even the typically argumentative Neptoids were stunned into silence as the final transmission from Operative Vex played on the holographic display. "We're not training to fight you. We have much bigger concerns." The human captain's words hung in the air long after the transmission ended. Zvex himself had been rushed into an advanced medical chamber, his body ravaged by the brief exposure to the training planet's environment despite all his technological and biological protections. The humans let him go. Chancellor Yolen finally broke the silence, his blue fur standing on end. They detected him immediately, could have killed or captured him, but they let him go. With all his intelligence, they wanted us to see. Admiral Vexela's crystalline form shimmered with agitation. They wanted us to know what they're capable of. General Zilthrax, whose tentacles had been writhing anxiously throughout the viewing, finally spoke. The question is not what they can do, but what they are preparing for. The human captain mentioned bigger concerns. What could possibly be worse than training on planets that can kill with a single breath? Grand Marshal Fodix gestured to the intelligence analysts waiting at the edges of the chamber. Analysis? The lead analyst, a tall, gaunt member of the Cerebrax species renowned for their computational minds, stepped forward. We have processed all available data, including Operative Zvex's observations. Our conclusion is that humans are not preparing for offensive operations against the Alliance. How can you be certain? Demanded Commander DRA, a reptilian representative who had been advocating for a preemptive strike against human colonies since the first intelligence reports arrived. Because it would be illogical, the analyst replied. If humans intended to attack us, they would train in environments similar to our homeworlds. Instead, they are training in conditions far more extreme than any inhabited planet in the Alliance. The analyst continued. Furthermore, their medical technology as observed by Operative Zvex indicate capabilities we had not previously attributed to humans. Tissue regeneration at the witnessed rate suggests they could repair combat injuries with remarkable efficiency. Yet they have shown no aggressive expansion toward Alliance territories. So what are they preparing for? Chancellor Yolen asked the question on everyone's mind. A new voice joined the conversation. They are preparing for survival. All eyes turned to Professor Ixel, the Alliance's foremost xenobiologist. The elderly Thrixian moved slowly to the center of the chamber, their segmented body carrying an air of ancient wisdom. I have studied the biological adaptations of species across the galaxy for over 200 cycles, Ixel began. What we are witnessing in humans is not preparation for conquest. It is the biological imperative of survival taken to its logical extreme. The professor activated a secondary display, showing historical images from human history. Humans evolved on a planet with wildly varying environments, from frozen wastes to scorching deserts, from oxygen-rich forests to high-altitude regions with thin air. Their natural adaptability is already remarkable among sentient species. The images shifted to show human conflicts through the ages. More importantly, these creatures have survived multiple near-extinction events of their own making. Nuclear conflicts, climate catastrophes, pandemics engineered by their own scientists. Each time, they have emerged stronger, more adaptable, more prepared for the next crisis. General Zilthrax's skin rippled with concern. You're suggesting they train in hellish environments because they've already survived self-inflicted hells? Precisely, Professor Ixel nodded. And they learned from each catastrophe. The humans have a saying, train harder than you fight. They create training conditions worse than any battlefield they expect to encounter. But what battlefield could be worse than these hell camps? Admiral Vexela asked. Professor Ixel's voice grew solemn. That is the question that should concern us all. What do the humans know or fear that we do not? The chamber erupted into debate once more. Commander DRA and his faction argued vehemently for immediate military action. We must strike before they become unstoppable. If they can survive on death worlds, our conventional weapons may soon be useless against them. Chancellor Yolen led the opposition. Have you learned nothing from what we've seen? They detected our most advanced stealth technology with ease. They treated our operative with mercy when they could have dissected him. And most importantly, they directly stated they're not preparing to fight us. Perhaps, General Zilthrax interjected, we should take them at their word and ask what these bigger concerns are? Grand Marshal Fodix absorbed the arguments silently, his 6 tentacles perfectly still in the pose his species adopted when deep in thought. Finally, he raised a primary tentacle for silence. We have observed humans long enough to know certain traits about them, Phoenix began. They are remarkably adaptable. They are capable of both great violence and unexpected compassion. And they are direct, sometimes to the point of rudeness by our diplomatic standards. The Grand Marshal continued. If Captain Jones offered diplomatic contact, I believe the offer was genuine. I propose we send an envoy, not of spies this time, but of diplomats. We will present ourselves openly and ask directly what they are preparing for. And if we don't like the answer, Commander DRA challenged. Then we will at least know what we face, Phoenix replied evenly. Knowledge before action, Commander. That has always been the Alliance way. After hours of further debate, the Council voted. The diplomatic approach won by a narrow margin. As the session concluded, species representatives returned to their ships, many already implementing defensive measures, withdrawing fleets from human-adjacent space, upgrading planetary shields, or in the case of the particularly paranoid Neptoids, beginning evacuation plans for their colonies nearest to human territory. Grand Marshal Phoenix remained in the chamber after the others had departed, studying the frozen image of Captain Jones standing in the acid rain, looking untroubled by conditions that had nearly killed their best operative. Prepare our most adaptive diplomatic team, he instructed his aide, and send a direct communication to the human government. We accept their invitation to talk. The Alliance diplomatic vessel approached Earth with deliberate visibility, its identification beacons broadcasting continuously. The delegation had expected a substantial military escort, perhaps even restrictions on their approach vector or demands for disarmament. Instead, they were met by a single, modestly armed human vessel that guided them to a space station orbiting Earth's moon. Welcome to Tranquility Diplomatic Station, came the human transmission. We've prepared environmental accommodations for all registered species in your delegation. Please inform us if any adjustments are needed for your comfort. Chancellor Yolen, who had insisted on leading the diplomatic mission despite the potential dangers, exchanged glances with Admiral Vexilla. They're being surprisingly accommodating, he noted, or they simply wish us to lower our guard. The Admiral replied, her crystalline form reflecting the lights of the command deck. The Alliance vessel docked without incident, and the delegation was escorted to a remarkably well-designed conference facility. Each section was carefully engineered to match the atmospheric, gravitational, and temperature requirements of the different Alliance species, an impressive feat of environmental engineering that must have been hastily assembled in the days since they accepted the human invitation. How did they know the exact environmental parameters for a Thrixian relaxation chamber? Professor Ixel wondered aloud, examining the perfectly calibrated humidity controls in their assigned area. Even among the Alliance, few understand our physiological requirements in such detail. They've been studying us, Admiral Vexilla concluded, just as we've studied them. The diplomatic team was allowed to settle in and acclimatize before the formal meeting. When the time came, they were escorted to the main conference chamber, a multi-environmental space where translucent barriers separated different atmospheric zones while still allowing face-to-face communication. The human delegation entered from the opposite side. It was smaller than expected, just 5 individuals led by a tall, dark-skinned woman with close-cropped white hair and an air of quiet authority. Welcome to Tranquility, she began, her words flowing through the advanced translation system. I am Ambassador Elena Garcia of the United Earth Government. On behalf of humanity, I thank you for accepting our invitation. Chancellor Yolen performed the traditional greeting of the Alliance. We come in peace and with curiosity, Ambassador. I am Chancellor Yolen, representing the Galactic Alliance Council. Garcia smiled. Let's dispense with excessive formalities, Chancellor. We're aware that your operative, Zvex, was sent to our training facility on Hellfire. We're also aware that what he witnessed has caused considerable concern among your leadership. The directness was jarring, but not unexpected. Professor Ixel had briefed the delegation on human communication patterns. They often value directness over diplomatic niceties. Indeed, Ambassador, Yolen acknowledged. Your training methods are disturbing to us. Captain Jones mentioned bigger concerns than potential conflict with the Alliance. We would like to understand what those concerns might be. Ambassador Garcia nodded to an aide, who placed a small device on the table. It projected a holographic star map of a region at the edge of the charted galaxy. 3 standard years ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected unusual energy signatures from this region, Garcia explained. Initial analysis suggested natural phenomena, perhaps neutron star collisions or other astronomical events. The hologram zoomed in, showing irregular energy pulses emanating from several points. 6 months later, we lost contact with an exploratory science vessel in this area, Garcia continued. When a rescue mission arrived, they found this. The hologram changed to show the wreckage of a ship, clearly human in design, floating in space. The damage patterns were unlike anything the Alliance representatives had seen before. The hull hadn't been breached by conventional weapons. Rather, it appeared to have been dissolved. Whatever attacked our ship used technology or natural capabilities unlike anything in our records, Garcia said. The rescue team found only one survivor in a sealed research pod. Before she died, she transmitted this. The hologram flickered to show a human female, severely injured. They're not machines, she gasped into the recording device. Not organic either. Something else. They consumed the ship. They're consuming everything. There, the recording cut off abruptly. A heavy silence fell over the conference room. We've detected similar energy signatures moving slowly but steadily toward populated regions of the galaxy, Garcia continued after a moment. Our scientists believe we're facing a previously unknown form of life, or perhaps non-life would be more accurate, that consumes matter at the molecular level. And this is why you train on death worlds. Admiral Vexila asked, her voice betraying her shock. Garcia nodded, then picked up a small container from the table. She opened it and poured a dark liquid into a cup. This is called coffee, she explained. It's a stimulant humans enjoy. It also contains compounds that will be highly toxic to most of your species. She took a sip, then set the cup down. Humans have always trained for the worst possible scenarios, Admiral. It's how we survived our own self-inflicted catastrophes. When we encountered these entities, we realized we needed to push ourselves beyond normal limits. The planet's like hellfire, Chancellor Yolen realized. You're training to fight in environments where these entities might have an advantage, or environments they might create as they break down matter, Garcia confirmed. We don't know the full extent of the threat yet, but we know we need soldiers who can operate in any condition: extreme heat, toxic atmospheres, high radiation, variable gravity. Professor Ixel moved closer to the environmental barrier. Ambassador, if this threat is real and approaching, it concerns all sentient life in the galaxy. Why not bring this information to the Alliance immediately? Garcia's expression was solemn. Would you have believed us, Professor? Without evidence? We needed to understand the threat better before raising alarms. And frankly, we needed to be certain the Alliance wouldn't view humanity itself as the primary threat. Some still do, Admiral Vexila noted pointedly. Which is why we allowed your operative to observe our training, Garcia replied. We wanted you to see that we're preparing for survival, not conquest. A human military officer who had been silent until now spoke up. We're not asking the Alliance to believe our claims blindly. We're prepared to share all our data on these entities. Our scientists call them void eaters for lack of a better term. Ambassador Garcia nodded. We propose a joint scientific mission to the affected region. Your scientists, our military escort. See the evidence firsthand. Chancellor Yolen consulted quietly with the other delegates before responding. Your proposal is reasonable, Ambassador, but it would require trust that has not yet been established between our peoples. Then let me offer proof of our good faith, Garcia said. She gestured, and a side door opened. Operative Zvex entered, looking fully recovered from his traumatic experience on Hellfire. Your operative was severely injured by his exposure to Hellfire's environment, Garcia explained. Our medical team used regenerative techniques developed for our extreme environment training programs to repair the damage. He has made a full recovery. Zvex approached the Alliance delegation. It's true, he confirmed. They could have let me die or held me prisoner. Instead, they healed injuries that our own medical technology would have struggled to address. Chancellor Yolen turned back to Garcia. This gesture is appreciated, Ambassador. But if these Void Eaters are as dangerous as you claim, why share this information now? Why not continue your preparations in secret? Garcia's expression grew grave. Because our latest calculations indicate the threat is accelerating. And because humanity, despite our extreme training, cannot face this alone. We need the Alliance, your different biologies, your diverse technologies, your unique perspectives. She stood up, placing both hands on the table. Chancellor, I'm not here to form a military alliance against a hypothetical threat. I'm here because we've glimpsed an extinction-level event approaching, and we believe only a truly united response has any hope of stopping it. The ensuing discussions lasted for 3 full Earth days. The human delegation provided all their data on the Void Eaters, limited though it was, and answered countless questions about their extreme training methods, regenerative medical technology, and defensive preparations. On the final day, Chancellor Yolen requested a private meeting with Ambassador Garcia. They met in a neutral environmental chamber, with only translators present. Your people are remarkable, Ambassador, Yolen began. Where others might see only threats, you see challenges to overcome. Where others might hide from harsh realities, you train to face them directly. We've had a lot of practice surviving, Chancellor, Garcia replied with a small smile. Sometimes through intelligence, sometimes through sheer, stubborn refusal to die. The Alliance has reviewed your evidence and your proposals, Yolen continued. We are prepared to establish a formal diplomatic relationship with humanity and to initiate the joint scientific mission to investigate these Void Eaters. Garcia nodded with evident relief. That's welcome news, Chancellor. However, Yolen added, there is considerable fear among some council members. Your training methods have created warriors that could potentially threaten Alliance worlds if relations soured. We understand the concern, Garcia acknowledged. What would ease these fears? Yolen's fur rippled in what humans might recognize as a thoughtful expression. Some have suggested an exchange program. Alliance military observers at your training facilities, human representatives in our defense councils. Transparency as we build trust. That can be arranged, Garcia agreed without hesitation. We have nothing to hide, Chancellor. Our goal is survival for all sentient life. Yolen nodded slowly. There is one more thing. Some of our more adventurous military commanders have expressed interest in your training methods. Garcia's eyebrows rose in surprise. You want your people to train on Hellfire? Not immediately, and certainly not all species would be capable, Yolen clarified. But if this threat is as grave as you believe, perhaps we too should prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Ambassador Garcia extended her hand, a human gesture of agreement that Yolen recognized from the cultural briefings. The Chancellor extended his furred appendage in return. To facing the darkness together, Garcia said. And surviving it, Yolen added. The formal treaty was signed the following day. The Alliance would recognize humanity as a sovereign power with all diplomatic privileges. In return, humans would share their advanced regenerative medical technology and establish joint training programs for those Alliance species hardy enough to participate. Most importantly, a joint fleet would depart within a month to investigate the Void Eater threat directly. As the Alliance delegation prepared to return to their headquarters, Admiral Vexela approached Dr. Prakash, the human physician who had treated Zvex. I've studied your regenerative techniques, the crystalline admiral said. They're remarkably similar to technologies my species developed centuries ago, but abandoned as too resource-intensive. Oh, Dr. Prakash looked interested. We'd be fascinated to compare notes. Our techniques are effective, but still experimental. The side effects can be unpredictable. Side effects. The doctor nodded. Accelerated healing sometimes causes unusual neural pathways to form. Some patients report enhanced sensory perception. Others develop heightened reflexes. One soldier who underwent full thoracic regeneration can now hold his breath for nearly 15 minutes. Admiral Vexela's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been concern. These changes don't worry you? Dr. Prakash shrugged. They're adaptations. Humans have always adapted to survive. Now we're just accelerating the process. He glanced toward the window, showing Earth below. Evolution is too slow for the threats we face now. The Alliance fleet departed Earth orbit with mixed emotions. Fear had given way to cautious cooperation, but suspicion lingered in many minds. Grand Marshal Fodix convened an emergency session of the War Council upon the diplomatic team's return. The chamber, once filled with panic at the thought of human super soldiers, now buzzed with nervous energy of a different kind. These Void Eaters present a greater threat than anything the Alliance has faced in our shared history, Chancellor Yolen reported to the assembled representatives. The human evidence, while limited, appears genuine. Their concern is not conquest, but survival for themselves and all sentient life. Commander DRA, still skeptical, thumped his scaled fist on the council table. And we trust their word on this? Perhaps this is merely an elaborate deception to lower our defenses. Admiral Vexela's crystalline form glimmered with impatience. I observed their medical technology firsthand, Commander. It is genuine and beyond our current capabilities in several respects. They shared it freely as a gesture of good faith. And what are these? Training facilities? Another representative asked. Did they offer explanations for their extreme methods? Chancellor Yolen nodded. They did more than explain. They've invited Alliance military observers to witness their training programs directly. Additionally, they've offered to establish joint training for species capable of withstanding the conditions. This announcement caused a stir. General Zilthrax's skin flashed with patterns of disbelief. Who among us could possibly train alongside humans in such environments? Several species have potential candidates, Professor Ixel interjected. With proper medical modifications similar to those operatives Vex underwent, limited participation might be possible. The humans have offered their regenerative technology to assist. Grand Marshal Fodix raised a tentacle for silence. The question before us is clear. Do we commit Alliance resources to this joint investigation of the Void Eater threat, and do we pursue deeper military cooperation with humanity? The debate raged for hours, but ultimately pragmatism prevailed. The Alliance had survived for millennia by adapting to new threats and incorporating diverse species and their unique capabilities. Humanity, with their bizarre adaptability and determination, represented a valuable, if somewhat terrifying, potential ally. Very well, Fodix declared as the final vote was tallied. We will proceed with the joint scientific mission. We will establish diplomatic relations with the human government, and we will cautiously explore joint training initiatives. He turned to General Zilthrax. General, you will oversee the selection of military personnel for the Observer Program and potential training participants. Choose individuals with mental flexibility and physical resilience. The general's skin pulsed with patterns indicating acceptance, though tinged with apprehension. As the council adjourned, Commander DRA approached Fodix privately. You realize, Marshal, that if humans can train and fight in environments no Alliance species can survive, they would have an insurmountable military advantage should relations sour. Fodix's tentacles arranged themselves in a pattern indicating somber agreement. I am well aware, Commander. But consider the alternative. If these Void Eaters are real, wouldn't you prefer to have humans fighting alongside us rather than leaving us to face such a threat alone? Perhaps, DRA conceded reluctantly. But I'll be watching them carefully. As will we all, Fodix replied. 2 standard months later, 3 Alliance military observers arrived at Camp Hellfire. They were met on the landing pad by Captain Sarah Jones, who stood comfortably in the toxic atmosphere, wearing only a lightweight environmental suit. Welcome to Hell. She greeted them cheerfully as they exited their heavily shielded shuttle, or at least what passes for it in human training lexicon. The observers, a modified Zilthraxian lieutenant, a crystalline Vexilin security specialist, and a heavily enhanced representative from the methane-breathing Gorgons, could barely move in their protective gear despite extensive modifications to both their equipment and biology. "The gravity is crushing," the Zilthraxian managed to say through his translator. Captain Jones nodded sympathetically. "You'll adapt faster than you think. Human bodies complain too, at first. Now watch." She gestured to where a squad of human soldiers jogged past, carrying heavy equipment through the acid rain. Their protective suits were visibly less substantial than those of the Alliance observers. "These recruits have been here for 3 weeks," Jones explained. "When they arrived, they could barely stand, just like you. Now they run 5 miles daily through terrain that would kill most beings in minutes." The Vexilin observer's crystalline form trembled slightly. How was this possible without extensive genetic modification? Human adaptation isn't primarily genetic, not in the short term, Jones explained as she led them toward the facility's main structure. "It's cellular and neural. Our bodies learn. Our cells adapt. Our minds overcome. We call it conditioning." Inside the main structure, environmental controls created a slightly less lethal atmosphere. The observers were escorted to medical units where they received treatments to help their bodies cope with Hellfire's punishing conditions. "You won't be participating in the full training regimen," Jones assured them. "This is just an observation tour." But even observation on Hellfire requires biological support. As the Alliance observers recovered in the medical bay, they watched recordings of the day's training exercises on monitoring screens. Human soldiers practiced warfare in conditions that simulated exposure to vacuum, radiation storms, and atmospheric toxicity levels that defied belief. The purpose of this particular exercise, Jones narrated as the screen showed soldiers moving through what appeared to be a chamber filled with green mist, is to train neural responses to continue functioning when exposure to neurotoxins begins affecting cognitive functions. The Gorgon observers' breathing apparatus hissed as they processed this information. "You intentionally expose your warriors to neurotoxins." "Controlled exposure," Jones clarified, "with immediate medical intervention available. But yes, if they encounter such toxins in actual combat, their bodies and minds will recognize the effects and continue functioning for crucial additional minutes instead of succumbing immediately." "This is beyond extreme," the Zilthraxian lieutenant commented. "It's almost evolutionary forcing." Jones smiled. "That's exactly what it is. We don't have time for natural evolution to prepare us for what's coming. So we accelerate the process." The Alliance observers spent a full week at Camp Hellfire, documenting training methods that violated virtually every safety protocol in Alliance military doctrine. They witnessed injuries that would permanently disable most species being treated as minor inconveniences by human medics. They observed psychological conditioning that would be considered torture in many Alliance cultures. Yet they also saw something unexpected. The humans genuinely enjoyed the challenge. Despite the pain, despite the danger, the soldiers laughed, formed bonds, and took pride in their increasing capabilities. It wasn't mere stoicism. It was an almost incomprehensible enthusiasm for overcoming what should have been insurmountable obstacles. On the final day of their observation tour, Captain Jones invited the Alliance representatives to witness what she called a graduation ceremony. They watched from a sealed observation platform as a class of 50 human soldiers who had completed the 6-month Hellfire training program faced their final test. For the final exercise, Jones explained, they will traverse the Crucible, a 20-mile course that includes every environmental hazard Hellfire has to offer, while simultaneously engaging hostile drones programmed to simulate enemy combatants. The Alliance observers watched in stunned silence as the human soldiers charged into conditions that their monitoring equipment registered as immediately lethal. The soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, their bodies somehow functioning in an environment that should have shut down their biological processes within minutes. 37 minutes, Jones announced when the first soldier completed the course, emerging bloody but triumphant from the final obstacle. A new record. How many typically survive this final test? The Vexilin asked carefully. Jones looked surprised at the question. All of them survive, observer. That's the point. We don't train them to die. We train them to live through anything. True to her word, all 50 soldiers completed the course. Some required immediate medical attention for severe injuries, but their faces showed pride rather than trauma. These graduates will now join our Void Response Force, Jones informed the observers. They represent our front line against the threat we've detected. Similar training programs are running on 4 other extreme environment worlds, each focusing on different environmental challenges. As the Alliance observers prepared to depart Hellfire, the Zilthraxian lieutenant asked the question that had been bothering them all week. Captain Jones, your soldiers trained to survive conditions worse than anywhere in known space. What exactly are you preparing them to face? Jones's expression turned grave. Lieutenant, the entities we call Void Eaters don't just attack. They transform environments to suit their own existence. Atmospheres become toxic. Radiation levels spike. Molecular structures destabilize. We're not just training soldiers to fight in extreme conditions. We're training them to fight in conditions that may be weaponized against them. The implication hung in the air between them. The Alliance observers departed with their comprehensive reports and a new understanding of human determination that was simultaneously reassuring and terrifying. The joint scientific mission to investigate the Void Eater phenomenon launched 2 weeks later. The fleet consisted of 7 Alliance vessels equipped with the most advanced scientific instruments available, escorted by 5 human military ships carrying soldiers from the Extreme Environment Training Program. Ambassador Garcia personally saw off the mission from the orbital platform circling Earth. May you find answers, she told the assembled commanders, and may those answers give us hope rather than confirmation of our fears. The fleet's journey to the far reaches of explored space was uneventful for the first 3 weeks. Alliance and human crews cautiously established working relationships, sharing knowledge and techniques while maintaining a professional distance. Dr. Prakash, who had been assigned as Chief Medical Officer for the human contingent, spent considerable time with the Alliance scientists, explaining the biological modifications that allowed humans to survive in hostile environments. The key breakthrough wasn't technological, he explained during one such session. It was conceptual. We stopped trying to completely shield humans from extreme conditions and instead focused on helping the body adapt to them. But there must be limits, objected a Cerebrax scientist. Biological systems cannot indefinitely withstand conditions that contradict their basic chemistry. True, Prakash acknowledged. But those limits are far more flexible than previously assumed. The human body can learn to process unusual elements, redirect energy systems, even temporarily shut down non-critical functions to preserve core survival. As the fleet approached the region where the Void Eater signals had been detected, these academic discussions gave way to tense preparation. The Alliance vessels deployed their long-range sensors while the human ships moved into defensive formation. Energy signatures detected, reported the sensor chief on the lead Alliance vessel. Pattern matches human records of Void Eater emissions. All ships, yellow alert. Ordered Fleet Commander Zoth, a veteran of the Alliance's rare military engagements. Science teams begin full spectral analysis. Defense teams stand ready. For 3 days, the fleet maintained a safe distance while gathering data. The readings were unlike anything in Alliance scientific records. Strange fluctuations in subspace, matter transitioning between states that should have been impossible, energy patterns that defied known physical laws. We need closer readings, the lead scientist finally declared. The phenomena are too complex to analyze from this distance. Commander Zoth hesitated. The human records indicate their science vessel was destroyed when they attempted closer observation. That vessel wasn't prepared, countered Captain Reyes of the human contingent. They had no idea what they were facing. We've come equipped for this mission. After consultation with both human and Alliance leadership, a compromise was reached. A small, heavily shielded probe ship would be dispatched with a minimal crew, 2 Alliance scientists and 2 human specialists from the Extreme Environment Program. The probe ship departed with strict instructions to maintain continuous transmission and to withdraw at the first sign of danger. For 6 hours, the mission proceeded smoothly. The probe transmitted invaluable data as it cautiously approached the anomalous region. "We're getting clear readings now," reported Dr. Vell, the Alliance physicist aboard the probe. "These aren't natural phenomena. There's structure to the energy patterns, almost like a form of communication. Can you identify what's generating them?" Commander Zoth asked over the comm link. "Not precisely, but wait." Vell's voice changed abruptly. "Something's changing. The patterns are intensifying." There. The transmission became garbled. The fleet watched as the probe's energy signature fluctuated wildly on their sensors. "Probe ship, withdraw immediately," Zoth ordered. Through the static, Dr. Vell's voice came through in fragments. "Molecular destabilization. Environment changing, suits failing." Then, with chilling clarity, "They're aware of us." The probe's emergency beacon activated, signaling catastrophic systems failure. Without waiting for orders, the nearest human vessel broke formation and accelerated toward the probe's position. "Human ship Dauntless, return to formation," Commander Zoth demanded. "Negative, Commander," came the reply from Dauntless' captain. "We have extreme environment teams ready for immediate rescue operations. Our ship is hardened against the conditions reported." The Alliance fleet watched as Dauntless approached the now silent probe. For 20 agonizing minutes, there was no communication. Sensors showed environmental conditions around the probe deteriorating rapidly. Radiation spiking, atmospheric composition changing, even the fabric of space itself appearing to warp in ways that defied explanation. Then, Dauntless re-established contact. "We have survivors," reported the captain, voice strained. "1 Alliance scientist and 1 human specialist. Condition critical. The probe has been consumed. There's no other word for it. Molecular disintegration unlike anything we've encountered." "What about the others?" Zoth asked. The pause before the answer told its own story. "Not recoverable," the human captain finally said. "The Alliance crew member. There wasn't enough left to identify. Our specialist activated her emergency beacon before the end. Her suit logs may contain crucial data." As Dauntless retreated to the fleet's position, the sensor officer on Zoth's vessel suddenly sat upright. "Commander, multiple energy signatures activating in the anomalous region. They're moving toward us. All vessels, red alert," Zoth ordered. "Prepare for possible hostile contact." The human ships immediately moved into an aggressive defense posture, placing themselves between the approaching signatures and the Alliance scientific vessels. "Alliance fleet, this is Captain Reyes. We'll take point on this. Our ships and crews are better prepared for whatever's coming." Before Commander Zoth could respond, the Void Eaters made their presence known. They weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were distortions in space, amorphous regions where reality itself seemed to unravel. As they approached, the fleet's systems began experiencing cascading failures. Hull integrity alarms sounded on every vessel as molecular bonds in their outer plating began to weaken. "All ships, maximum distance," Zoth ordered. "Full reverse. Thrust." The Alliance vessels struggled to withdraw, their engines straining against some unseen force that seemed to be pulling them toward the approaching anomalies. In contrast, the human ships accelerated forward, their modified hulls glowing with energy fields specifically designed to resist molecular degradation. "What are they doing?" gasped an Alliance officer as they watched the human vessels engage directly with the Void Eaters. The answer came moments later. The human ships launched swarms of what appeared to be specialized drones into the heart of the anomalies. Simultaneously, they began emitting complex energy patterns that seemed to disrupt the Void Eaters' advance. "They're communicating," realized a Cerebrac science officer, "or attempting to." For several tense minutes, the human vessels maintained their position while the Alliance fleet retreated to a safer distance. Then, without warning, the Void Eaters withdrew, disappearing back into the anomalous region as quickly as they had emerged. When the human ships rejoined the Alliance fleet, Captain Reyes immediately requested an emergency conference. "They are definitely sentient," she reported to the assembled commanders and scientists. "Our xenolinguistic drones detected patterns consistent with a form of communication. Not language as we understand it, but structured information exchange." "Did you establish contact?" asked Commander Zoff. "Not exactly," Reyes replied grimly. "But we confirmed our worst fears. These entities don't just consume matter. They transform it. They're converting normal space into something else. Something that supports their form of existence while making it lethal to ours." She activated a holographic display showing data from the encounter. "This isn't an invasion in the traditional sense. It's more like terraforming, except they're not forming Terra, Earth-like conditions. They're creating void-like conditions." The implications hung heavy in the conference room. This wasn't an enemy that could be defeated through conventional warfare. This was an existential threat to all matter as the Alliance understood it. "The good news," Reyes continued, "is that our counter-resonance fields were partially effective. They slowed the molecular degradation process significantly. With refinement, we might develop more effective shields." "And the survivors from the probe?" asked Dr. Prakash. Reyes's expression darkened. "The Alliance scientist, Dr. Vell, is in critical condition. His molecular structure was partially altered. We've placed him in stasis until we can develop treatment." "And your specialist?" Specialist Zhang activated her extreme environment protocols. Her modified biology resisted the transformation process long enough for rescue. She's conscious and has provided valuable observations. Apparently, the human capacity for adaptation that we've cultivated in our training programs granted her some resistance to the Void Eater's influence. The journey back to Alliance space was somber. The fleet carried with it confirmation of a threat beyond anything previously encountered, and the sobering knowledge that current defenses were woefully inadequate. Upon their return, an emergency session of the full Alliance Council was convened. Representatives from all member species gathered to hear the mission report and determine the galactic response to the Void Eater threat. The human delegation, led by Ambassador Garcia and the military commanders of the Extreme Environment Program, presented their findings without diplomatic softening. "The entities we face represent a fundamental threat to all organic and conventional inorganic life," Garcia stated. "They don't seek conquest. They seek conversion. Space itself becomes hostile to our form of existence in their presence." Grand Marshal Fodix, addressing the assembled representatives, added his own assessment. "The mission data confirms that conventional military approaches will be ineffective. This threat requires a new paradigm of defense, and humanity's extreme adaptation programs may offer our best hope." The Chamber of Harmony had never been so silent. The Alliance had faced wars, natural disasters, even plague, but never a threat to the fundamental nature of existence itself. Chancellor Yolen finally broke the silence. "What do you propose, Ambassador Garcia? How does humanity suggest we proceed?" Garcia exchanged glances with Captain Jones, who had been brought in to advise on the extreme environment training programs. Jones nodded slightly, and Garcia turned back to address the council. "We propose a joint initiative," she said firmly. "A three-pronged approach, scientific research to better understand and potentially communicate with these entities, technological development of protective measures against molecular destabilization, and, most crucially, a combined training program to prepare defensive forces capable of operating in Void Eater transformed environments." Captain Jones stepped forward. "The Human Extreme Environment Program has demonstrated that biological adaptation can provide resistance to the Void Eater's influence. We offer to expand our training facilities to accommodate Alliance species with suitable physiological potential." The council erupted into discussion. Many representatives were horrified at the idea of sending their people to train in conditions that had been graphically described as hellish. Others saw no alternative. "This is madness," objected the representative from a species of delicate, crystalline beings. Our physical forms cannot possibly adapt as humans do. You would send our people to die in your training camps. Not all species would participate directly, Jones clarified. Some would contribute through scientific or support roles. But those who can adapt, even partially, would form the core of our defense force. After days of debate, the Alliance Council reached a decision that would forever change the relationship between humanity and the galactic community. By a narrow margin, they voted to accept the human proposal and establish what would become known as the Void Defense Initiative. 6 months later, Captain Jones stood on an observation platform overlooking a training field on Hellfire. Beside her, Grand Marshal Fodix watched through a specially designed environmental suit as the first mixed unit of human and Alliance soldiers navigated an obstacle course through a simulated Void Eater environment. "I never thought I would see the day," Fodix commented, his tentacles arranged in a pattern indicating wonder and concern in equal measure. Alliance soldiers voluntarily subjecting themselves to this. Jones nodded, watching as a modified Zilthraxian warrior helped a human teammate over a barrier while acid rain dissolved the outer layer of their protective gear. "They're adapting faster than we anticipated. Your species have capabilities we lack: regenerative processes, alternative metabolic pathways, unique sensory perception, combined with human endurance and adaptability. We might actually stand a chance," Fodix finished. The mixed unit reached the end of the course, bloodied and damaged, but successful. Unlike the purely human units Jones had trained before, these soldiers represented a new approach, combining the best traits of multiple species into a force that could withstand conditions no single species could face alone. As the soldiers regrouped, laughing and supporting each other despite their injuries, Jones allowed herself a moment of hope. "The Void Eaters thought they found easy prey in this galaxy," she said quietly. "They didn't count on finding species crazy enough to adapt to their own personal hell." Fodix's translator rendered a sound that might have been a chuckle. "Perhaps that is humanity's greatest gift to the Alliance. Not your technology or even your training methods, but your absolutely irrational refusal to accept defeat." Below them, a human instructor was already briefing the unit on their next exercise, a simulated combat scenario in conditions that would kill an unmodified member of any known species within minutes. The soldiers, human and alien alike, listened with expressions of grim determination rather than fear. "To surviving the unsurvivable," Jones said, echoing the unofficial motto of the Extreme Environment Program. Together, Fodix added, "In a remote monitoring station at the edge of explored space, sensors detected the Void Eater's energy signatures growing stronger, moving slowly but inexorably toward inhabited systems. The galactic existential threat continued its advance, unaware that the species in its path were preparing a welcome unlike anything it had encountered before. In the harsh environments of training worlds scattered across Alliance and human space, soldiers learned to laugh in the face of conditions that should have killed them instantly. They were evolving, not through the slow process of natural selection, but through the accelerated forge of necessity. The galaxy's fate would depend on this unlikely alliance. Beings from across the stars united by a shared determination to adapt, to endure, and to overcome what should have been unsurvivable. And at the heart of this transformation was the most improbable of teachers: humanity, whose history of surviving self-inflicted catastrophes had inadvertently prepared them to lead the galaxy's defense against its greatest threat. As a human sergeant was fond of telling his mixed unit of trainees on Hellfire, "If you can fight in hell, you can fight anywhere." And together, we're going to teach the Void Eaters what happens when you pick a fight with species crazy enough to train on planets that should have killed them.